heavens, oh lordy lord!
If you've come for me talking about music, I'm not going to be talking about music. I'm going to be talking about a response video to an analog horror series. I know, it's crazy. So, analog horror, it's a genre of horror that's come about recently, if you're unfamiliar, online, on YouTube specifically, where people take the grainy, smudgy visuals of VHS tapes from the 80s and 90s and uses that kind of in a kind of post Blair Witch way, where it's meant to kind of show this looming evil in a way that's kind of like you're the first one to find this tape and you alone know know of this threat. And I think that it's one of the more refreshing ways to present horror, with most horror nowadays just kind of being jump scare fests. I'm looking at you, Five Nights at Freddy's. I think it's refreshing for the horror scene to kind of present its kind of fear in a very abstract yet matter-of-fact way that isn't just that's reliant on atmosphere, but isn't as reliant on world building as something, let's say, Nightmare on Elm Street, or again, Blair Witch Project, or even Paranormal Activity, or whatever. Basically, I find it really fascinating. Some of my favorite horror has come out of the genre, and particularly one that's come out recently that's polarized the community, known in the community as the Painter series. Now, the Painter series is made by this one YouTuber, Urban Spook, aka Urban Slug, who has been doing stuff online, creating content online for about 10 years now, at least 10 years now. So he kind of knows what he's doing when he creates. Not that this clarifies any or like justifies any negative stuff or negative criticism coming at him from other people. But he there's a sense with his work that he knows kind of what he's doing. Like you're doing something for long enough, or doing things within a certain space for long enough, you kind of get the hang of it. You kind of get the hang of what kind of audience you're making this out to, such and such. But regardless, a lot of people like it, a lot of people hate it. I'm in the camp that likes it, but I want to talk about one person who made a video talking about, some of the issues they have with it. The title of this video being, "This analog horror has some issues," parentheses, Urban Spook, by a one, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this, Minanxa. I know it's an X, but it's I'm saying the X like a xylophone. So I think the one thing that gripes me about this, there's a couple other points from this video that I could talk about. But the one thing, just to keep this video brief, is one point about how the content in this is just too vulgar. It's too vulgar for horror. And I understand that it is incredibly disgusting to the point where it kind of makes you question the mind of the person making it in the first place. But here's the thing. That's what good horror media is supposed to do. If you're not scared, or at least not questioning your reality to an extent when you watch something scary, or read something scary, or play something scary, is it even scary? At that point, it's not even horror, it's just horror themed. If you want to build a world and build characters, go ahead, you can do that in horror, but that's not the focus, nor should it be. Again, going back to 7, some of the murders in that movie are disgusting. There is one murder relating to the sin of lust, where a man is held at gunpoint and is forced to rape a woman with a strap-on with a knife attached to it. Every time that man thrusts, he stabs the woman in the junk. That's disgusting. And that's not even really a horror movie, it just borrows from horror. But if you want an example of an actual horror movie, look no further than John Carpenter's The Thing. A lot of the horror from that movie comes from you questioning your own reality to an extent. It kind of makes you think, what if you were in that situation? Who would you trust? Are you going to trust a human, or are you going to trust the humanoid mimic that's going to turn you into celluloid soup? Of course, the scenarios like those aren't real, but they're supposed to make you think, what if it was real? But if you want a real life scenario, or at least a more realistic scenario, look no further than The Goddamn Shining. that movie's pretty much got it all. It's got a scenario that makes you question what the hell is even going on. Why is Jack Torrance freaking out? What is happening with the room with the old lady in it? Why is a bear suit man giving head to a butler? If that doesn't make you feel weird or uncomfortable or disturbed or whatever, I don't know what. Like how could that not evoke anything in you? Now, not to be the contrarian who compares clearly controversial and hated thing to the greats of the genre as an escape from any real like reasoning or anything like that, but I think if you're going to compare you know, media in general, I think you should compare it to the greats of the genre as kind of a comparison of like, hey, this thing does what this already great thing has done really well. Maybe it put its own spin on it, maybe it didn't, or maybe this thing did something that the greats have never done before in a way that's new and refreshing. One last topic that I want to cover that I was originally going to agree with, and then I thought about it a little more, is that the whole thing about merchandise being sold for the painter, and how there's like the paintings of the murder specifically are being sold on T-shirts, which I agree with to an extent. I don't think a T-shirt of that kind of thing should be the way you make merchandise off the franchise, but I don't think that kind of disallowing merchandise referencing the kind of disturbing events that happen in the movie should be that taboo. Because I think if you're going to sell merchandise in general about something, you kind of have to take into account that something, right? Like, maybe I'm being vague. Let's say I buy like a Chief Keef T-shirt, and like buying a Chief Keef T-shirt does not imply that I condone the things that he raps about in his music, right? Like I think of course he glamorizes these kind of topics, which again, people have been killed over. But then again, I'm not supporting the idea that people dying is good. I'm supporting the idea that his music is good, and therefore I want to kind of represent how much I appreciate the music in some physical way that not only expresses to myself but also to other people that I like thing. However, of course, I think a line should be drawn. Let's say, for example, Playboi Carti's recent mugshot, where he is kind of, he was charged with assaulting his pregnant girlfriend. If I get that on the T-shirt, I'm gonna get a couple stares. I'm gonna get people going like, dude, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you wear that? Like, as opposed to just wearing like a normal Playboi Carti T-shirt, which would, signify to people that, okay, you like Playboi Carti's music, okay. But the point, when you get to the point where it's like you're getting into specifics like that, it's like, okay, what are you trying to say with this kind of thing? Now I'm gonna come completely clean. I have not finished watching Minanxa's video on the painter, mostly because I just didn't want to hear any more bad takes, honestly. Like I feel like I had seen enough, or at least all that I wanted to see from that video. Perhaps one day I will come back to the video and give it, kind of maybe the credit that it deserves, or I guess the respect that it deserves. But considering some of Minanxa's other videos, thumbnails, and titles, I don't think I will. Now, like I stated, I'm biased. I like the Painter series, but I like it, and that's the reason why I'm partially why I'm making this video, but also just because I don't see a lot of Minanxa's arguments to be that objective, or at least that's from the arguments that I've witnessed from him. If you dislike the Painter series for any personal reasons, that's totally fine. I get that, but to sit back and label a lot of its flaws as objective and to not see it as a piece of art, which it is, like other pieces of media akin to it in the same genre as it is, I don't think that's incredibly fair, all things considered, and I think that is kind of intentionally taking nuance out of the conversation to kind of belittle the series as a whole. And I don't think this kind of treatment that the Painter has been getting is justified, because I don't think this kind of treatment would be applied to any lesser or greater creator had a similar idea been proposed. I honestly don't know why this whole thing's happening, which is why I'm making this video partially, just to kind of make sense of it all from, my point of view. It escapes me why people would disapprove of depictions of child torture and child murder in The Painter when that is kind of the backbone of Five Nights at Freddy's lore and has been since its inception almost a decade ago. I'm kind of reminded of this whole situation of the whole thing going on with the HBO series The Idol, where it seems that a lot of people are kind of just panning it because they kind of see it as this thing that it's clearly not trying to be, or that the medium shows the media to an audience that it just isn't for. Like with The Idol, I think people, if it had more of a if it attracted more of an art house kind of following, if it was more of like an indie movie per se or an indie series, it would be more acclaimed. But unfortunately for it, it's not acclaimed because it's on HBO, and one of the main stars is one of the most popular pop stars today. Um, and I think a similar case is happening with The Painter, where it just would have been better marketed as, not exactly an analog horror film or series, and it's instead maybe like an actual film with like real life action going on. Maybe this would be more suited for the theaters, like Seven, but instead it's kind of being marketed to a younger audience, and maybe an audience that isn't kind of that, no offense to the audience, isn't kind of ready for that kind of realism and grittiness. Not to pull a Rick and Morty and say you have to have a very high IQ to understand the moral philosophies and the harsh brutality of The Painter. No, I'm not trying to say that. But what I am trying to say is that not everyone is going to get everything. And not everyone is going to love everything. But some people are going to love and understand certain things. A lot. And I think the same applies to analog horror as a whole. Not everyone's going to get analog horror. Hell, we saw that with Skinamarink, where it was pretty damn polarizing because it was a thing that came out of a very niche community and was put on the live screen for a theater of potentially millions of people. And it's currently sitting at like a 5-star out of 10 on IMDb. It's pretty polarizing. So, at least from my perspective, I kind of see The Painter as kind of a product of what analog horror has been, or at least trying to be. I think this is what analog horror has been building up to up until this point. I mean, for a while, it's like a lot of analog horror has been just kind of following the examples of a select few series, but now here comes The Painter with something that's fresh and new, but also incredibly different to the point where people are kind of freaking out about it. And now you get people like Minanxa who are looking at it from this completely 180 view that it was never supposed to be viewed in. So I don't think it's entirely fair when people start this art movement that's very left field, and then something even left of field, even more left of field, comes along and completely stuns everyone, to the point where you have people questioning the media's right to exist and the creator's right to make it. I don't think that's entirely fair. I think everyone should be able to create what they want to make, regardless of the content. And if people don't like, if everyone's on board, and says it's garbage, then it probably might be garbage. But when you have something that's polarizing, I don't think you should jump to conclusions and throw nuance out the window just to be on one side or the other. I don't think it's the best analog horror series, but I don't think it's the worst. I think it's incredibly interesting, and I think it's worth having, more of a nuanced and discussion about it, If you like it, good. If you don't like it, good. But the last thing anyone should do regarding art is objectify it. Because once it's objectified, it's lost interpretation. And at the end of the day, what is art without interpretation? This video is already reaching the 15-minute mark, but just to wrap things up, if you have any comments, disagreeing or agreeing or whatever about the video, please comment. I'd love to keep this discussion going. And if you've made it this far, thank you for having an open ear. Not everyone has one of those.